Experiment number 58.
This is going to be part 5 of our Take My Muffin Iceberg, and things can only get crazier from here. So throughout the series, there's this running theme of a Neuralink device that the team keeps trying to sell off in different ways, and that device is called muffins. And in episode 5 of the series, Professor Noper becomes obsessed with redeeming himself in the field of scientific discoveries. So to remedy that, he decides to try and win a Millennium Prize. Now the Millennium Prize problems are real. There are 7 of them in total, and only 1 of them has ever been solved, with each one having a prize of $1 million. And out of these 7, Professor Noper chooses to solve the P versus NP equation. We see him in the lab writing formulas. His whiteboard is filled with different possible solutions to the problem. But Catman Rock, seeing him in like a state of delusion almost over trying to solve this problem, he has the idea to try and bring Corny in to weigh in on the situation. Just to find that Corny is too also having some type of existential crisis. Now, mind you, if you're familiar with the series, you know that Corny has lost his memory and he's struggling with the reality that he doesn't know who his parents are or even what his name is. But Rock had been giving him a memory restoration pill that would give him little tidbits of pieces of things from his past. Seeing Corny sad over this and also needing his help, Rock gives him another memory restoration pill, and he's shown a vision. Corny sees a vision of him and his father in some kind of throne room, and a war is going on outside. His father, concerned about his safety, puts him in a time machine and tells him that in order to save the kingdom, he has to grow up and come back once he has a solution. Now look, just because these two stories are adjacent to each other, they are very much related, and we're going to get into that. But as the doors of the time machine were closing on Corny, his dad tells him that that brand that they put on his backside is the coordinates for their home. So in theory, all he would have to do is scan the code and he should be able to find home. After this vision ends, Corny is excited with this new information and runs to Professor Noper, who scans the easy code and is given a string of numbers. The problem though is that these coordinates aren't just a place on Earth. They're also coordinates for a place in time. So he Googles time travel and finds a whole bunch of articles about the rise and fall of Professor Prawn, a man who invented a time machine. But somehow as he's testing the time machine, the experiment goes wrong and he ends up hurting himself and going into a coma. Now look, that part is a story for another day, but just trust me, follow me down this rabbit hole and you will not be disappointed. Now after reading these articles about Professor Prawn, Corny's ready to go to the hospital and talk to him. But before he leaves, Rock asks him to help Professor Noper figure out the equation. Professor Noper attempts to explain the equation, but he doesn't have the words for it, and expresses how he wishes he could just show Corny what was in his brain. And that concept triggers another vision from Corny. This vision essentially being the answer to the P versus NP problem. He explains that the reason why we can't share knowledge is because we can't share in a person's personal experience, but we could record and mirror that experience to a computer. These experiences could also be transmitted and received, literally projecting one brain into another. And you already know what I'm about to say. This entire episode is based in actual science. And not only did they break this shit down perfectly, they theorized a solution in the same breath. If you can't tell, this video is going to be a long one, but it's because these concepts are very complex and layered, which is exactly what makes this episode a masterpiece. Now, in order to decode this episode, we have to understand the workings of this equation. So for the sake of easy understanding, let's say you were on a treasure hunt. A treasure hunt in a room where there is 1 billion locked boxes. Now, only one of these boxes has the treasure, but you don't know which one, and each one of these boxes are locked with a combination lock. Now, the P variable is you having a map and knowing exactly where to find the treasure, where the NP variable denotes that you know all of the combinations, but you have no idea which box holds the treasure. Solving for this equation would make finding the answer to that problem, simple and fast, if not immediate. And without it being solved, equations like this take a lifetime. Can you see why the answer to this equation is so coveted? It would speed up computation by light years. Now let's talk about why this episode was so clever, because there's a lot of moving parts. Just in the way that this episode was formatted hints at a possible way to solve the theory. Throughout the episode, we see a lot of themes that are centered around time. And time is the biggest barrier to solving this equation. Because in order to solve for infinite possibilities, you would have to have an infinite amount of time. Unless this equation is solved, which would give us the ability to shorten the distance of infinity into a reasonable amount of time or calculation. The answer they're proposing in this episode is a time machine, with the biggest hint being the code that's on Corny's butt. The creation of coordinates for different points in time are the same as our metaphor, where the NP would have the combination to each one of the boxes. We will be able to explore all possibilities because we would have instant access to every possible outcome. Now let's take it back to how all of this relates to muffins. The brain sync technology that's actually the reason Dr. Noper is working on this equation in the first place. Because believe it or not, the process that they are trying to discover is already naturally occurring in our human minds. We already possess the natural ability to compute outcomes at the speed of light just by thinking about it. This is why Corny's second vision is so powerful. Because if we could recreate that power in the 3D, that would be the end of mental privacy as we know it. Every system would be able to be hacked at the drop of a dime, including our brains. And we will be able to share information between our species without words.